What's the most traumatic thing you've witnessed? When I was about 5, I was queuing for ice cream with my grandpa in front of the school where he had just picked me up from. Since school has just finished, there were quite some people queuing point and this little girl comes out of the school and instead of going in the queue, she tries to go to the front of the line. My grandpa, the gentle old man he is, very nicely said, "Hey little girl, see everyone here has been waiting their turn," pointing at the line, "so don't you think it would be fair you did too?" Or something like that. Little girl runs to a man standing close by, apparently her dad, and the dude, without skipping a beat, runs to my grandpa, who is holding my hand, and starts punching him like a madman, and yelling stuff about how his girl can do whatever the fuck she wants. People, of course, jumped in and made him stop. He just left with his kid. My grandpa was bleeding from his face and was bruised all over, but kept asking if I was okay. Saw someone fall from a cliff. Since I was a ranger at that time, I was part of the rescue team. 1 month later, the ranger who was accountable for this area of the cliff killed himself at the same location, and I was part of the rescue team again. Little warning. PLS, don't make selfies close to a cliff and listen to park rangers or authorities. My mother died from aggressive lung, bone, and brain cancer. I was her power of attorney, and when I got to the hospital, she was desperately trying to revoke her DNR. Nurses and doctors were trying to explain the risks, but she was losing oxygen to her brain. It was ultimately my decision, but they wanted me to try one more time. As I was explaining, she just looked at me in sheer terror and said, "Don't give up on me. I want to live," through gasps of air. That was the last thing she ever said. She was then put on a respirator that just lurched her body forward with every breath as she laid there completely unresponsive. I still have nightmares about the whole experience. I worked with a 6-year-old with autism and bipolar. He had a psychotic break and started trying to claw his own eyes out. His mother and I had to restrain him so he could be sedated. The whole time he was begging me to let him go and just let me die. 6 years old, mind you. 6. This was about 10 years ago. I still think about him a lot and hope he's okay. Probably isn't though, sadly. I watched a woman burn to death in her van. We tried to get her out. I can still smell it and see her face when she realized she could no longer escape. I came home to find my ex-boyfriend dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound the day after I broke up him. He texted me right before he did it, something like, "I love you and I'm sorry." I didn't think much of it at first. After hours of no reply, I drove home, and the whole time I just knew what I was going to walk into, but I was hoping I was wrong. I'm extremely paranoid and anxious and often overthink scenarios to the worst possible outcome. Walked into the house, all the lights were on. The TV was on and paused. The only sound I heard was the fan of the bathroom, light on, door open. I approached the room and noticed the bedside table drawer open, where the gun was kept. I walked up next to bathroom, knocked on the wall, and called out his name. No reply. I braced myself and peered around the corner into the doorway, and there he was. Not immediately traumatic, but watching my mother become an addict. She went from being my mother to being a violent, narcissistic stranger. The night that sucked the most was the night I gave her $500 of my own paycheck for bills, and she turned around and spent it on drugs in front of me in our front yard, and 2 days later our water and electricity got shut off due to non-payment. My former roommate killed herself. She took a bunch of toxic meth and slit her wrists just to be sure. She then apparently dragged herself into her kitchen and across the floor. The police speculated she changed her mind and was trying to reach the phone. Her current roommate found her. I arrived sometime later to support her. We sat in the living room for over an hour waiting for her to be picked up, while she lay in the kitchen with part of a sheet over her upper half and a very bored young first responder playing games on his phone in the hall. There was blood and vomit everywhere, but it was just so surreal. No one was in a rush and really was just dead in the kitchen. I saw my mum get hit by van when I was a kid. I had just crossed the road and I turned around and saw the van cut the corner and drive straight into her. Felt like I was watching it in slow motion. I don't know how, since it ran straight into her, but my mum got up and walked away with only a few tiny scratches. But I've been paranoid and overly cautious about crossing roads ever since. I took care of both of my grandparents whilst they were in hospice, one 4 months after the other. My grandmother, on my mother's side, had dementia along with her cancer, which was draining. What I take from her death was at least she didn't quite understand that she was dying. She wasn't afraid. My grandfather, on my father's side, on the other hand, was completely aware he was dying. Trying to comfort a loved one when all they want is for it to be over, and also trying to talk them through their fears, isn't something I'd wish on anyone. He was a big man before the cancer ate him up. Had a lot of pride. I don't think people truly realize what cancer takes, not just from those enduring it, but also from those watching loved ones go through it all. Once I was going to school by train and we were going really slow for some reason. I was looking out of the window on the rails. We passed by another train and that was when I saw why we were going slow. A man was hit by the other train. There was blood and body parts all over the rails. I saw the man's leg lying there far away from everything else. The whole train went quiet for the rest of the ride. It was really shocking for me, seeing a man ripped into pieces. I witnessed a kid getting hit by a car the other day. He's okay all things considered. Broken leg. Oddly enough, I saw his dad's Reddit post in a local forum and that's how I discovered he's okay. I went home and cried after seeing the kid on the ground. Seriously, don't use cell phones and drive. I went and identified my brother's body after he was hit and killed on his motorcycle. The accident I witnessed brought a lot of those emotions back. I was a primary caregiver for my mom when she was dying from breast cancer. I held my dog as we had to have him put down because he had cancer. That dog was my baby. We saw my father die in front of us when I was 19 and tried to helplessly save him. It was very traumatizing and I couldn't sleep properly for a while and my mom would yell in her sleep for months after that as well. The image never goes away. When I was 14 or 15 years old, myself and my cousins were coming home and we witnessed a dog, Dalmatian, get hit by a car and watched as the owner, a young kid maybe the same age as me, come running out and sit with his dog as his dog died. To watch him with his dog in his lap and taking his last breath while his owner cried in the middle of a busy street still upsets me to this day. As I'm typing this I'm tearing up. To this day, I take the lost life of a pet for someone a lot worse than a person. It's even worse for dogs. I'm dreading the day I would need to put mine down. Apart from several cats suffocating to death because of perforated lungs as a result of car crashes, I worked as a veterinary assistant. When I was about 6 years I went with my dad to the dentist, had a tooth removed, and we were going home. Waiting for the bus, across the street, a car doesn't stop at red light and enters full speed in a woman that was crossing the street. It was so bad that she got through in the air like a doll. I couldn't sleep for days and was crying about it a lot according to mom. It is a hell reminder in my mind to check twice and don't put my trust in stoplights. Some drivers don't give a sh*t. Went fishing on the lake when I was a kid. Some young people who were messing around with their nice boat got the throttle locked on full while doing a tight turn. I remember watching a girl get thrown from the boat and watching her pop her head out of the water just before the boat came around and hit her. My parents were just trying to get us out of there and some other people were trying to do CPR on a bloody corpse on the dock. 20 years later I still can't get the image of that lifeless body on the dock. 2 weeks ago I took my dog to the vet. A guy comes running in with a chihuahua and says she just had a big dog attack her. I could see a good amount of blood and some bite marks on the chihuahua, but it didn't look like anything too critical until the man turned around with the dog and revealed that her eye was popped out of the socket and blood covered the side of its face. They immediately took the dog to the back and put it to sleep for surgery. Later a vet tech came out and said they wouldn't be able to save the eye and that they'd have to remove it. It's the most gruesome thing I've seen in person. Probably the constant emotional and physical abuse my mother would put me through for about 20 years. I would have bruises my teachers and classmates would ask me about. Cops would come because a child was crying when it was really my mom just screaming at top of her lungs at me. She would hit my cats and tell me she wants to kick them like a football. She told me that even if she rapes or beats me, I still have to respect her because she is my parent.